Before the roar of the tyrannosaur, before the footfall of the great sauropods, there was a different world, a world reborn from catastrophe. This is the Triassic period, beginning 252 million years ago. It dawned in the shadow of the greatest extinction event life has ever known, the Great Dying, which obliterated over 90% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial life. The planet was a hothouse, a vast arid supercontinent called Pangaea, dominated by deserts and hardy seed-bearing flora. In this crucible of recovery, a new dynasty of reptiles was rising, the archosaurs, the ruling lizards. They were locked in an evolutionary arms race on the ground, growing larger, faster, more efficient. Their domain was the land and the water, but above them, a vast, silent frontier remained unconquered: the sky. It was an empty stage, an open invitation, a challenge written in the wind. For millions of years, the air was the exclusive realm of insects. But a revolution was quietly beginning in the shadows of the Triassic forests. The conquest of the air is no simple feat. It is a rebellion against the most fundamental force of nature, gravity. Every ascent is a battle. Every moment airborne, a triumph of biological engineering. For a terrestrial reptile, the challenges were immense. A body built for walking or running is heavy, its bones dense, its muscles arranged for locomotion on a solid surface. To fly is to remake oneself entirely. It demands lightness without sacrificing strength, a power source capable of generating immense lift, and a control system of breathtaking precision. As the archosaurs diversified on Pangaea, from the formidable crocodile-like phytosaurs in the rivers to the powerful predatory Ryusuchians on the plains, the sky above remained a stark contrast. It was a blue desert, an ocean of air devoid of vertebrate life. While the terrestrial world teemed with evolutionary experiments, the air held a silent promise of untapped resources, of escape from predation, of a new dimension of existence. The question was not if life would claim this domain, but how, and which creature would take that first, terrifying leap. The answer did not lie with the giants of the Triassic plains. Instead, the seeds of flight were sown in smaller, more unassuming creatures. We must look to the archosauromorphs, the wider group that includes the ancestors of crocodiles, dinosaurs, and, crucially, pterosaurs. Among them were small, nimble reptiles, built for speed and agility. Creatures like Scleromochlus, a tiny archosaur from what is now Scotland, possessed long hind limbs that suggest a capacity for hopping or running bipedally, much like a modern kangaroo rat. Others, like the Lagerpetids, or rabbit crocs, were slender, long-legged animals that exhibited a suite of bird-like features in their hips and legs. These were not lumbering brutes. They were energetic, fast-moving animals, likely insectivores, thriving in the undergrowth and on the rocky outcrops. Their light build and dynamic posture were pre-adaptations, unwitting preparations for an evolutionary journey that would eventually lead them off the ground and into the history books as the first masters of the sky. How does a ground-dwelling reptile become a creature of the air? For decades, paleontologists have debated two primary hypotheses: ground up versus trees down. While the image of a running reptile launching into the air is compelling, the energetic costs are staggering. The more widely accepted theory begins in the trees. The Triassic forests, though different from our own, were rich, multi-layered environments filled with towering conifers, cycads, and ferns. For a small, agile reptile, the canopy offered a world of opportunity: abundant insect prey and a refuge from larger terrestrial predators. It is in this arboreal setting that the journey to the sky likely began. The first step was not flight, but controlled falling. A leap from one branch to another, a fall arrested by a slight flattening of the body or a small flap of skin. Over countless generations, natural selection would favor any trait, however minor, that extended the distance or improved the control of these leaps. A slightly wider rib cage, a longer tail for balance, and, most importantly, the development of membranes of skin, patagia, stretching between limbs and body. Meet the Lagerpetidae. For a long time, these small, graceful reptiles were a footnote in the story of the archosaurs. But recent discoveries have placed them center stage in the origin of pterosaurs. Fossils like Lagerpetidae from Argentina or Dromaeosaurus from the American Southwest reveal an animal uniquely equipped for a life of agility. Their most striking features were their incredibly long hind limbs and specialized pelvic girdle, adaptations for powerful leaping. But it's their inner ear, revealed through high-resolution CT scans, that tells the most compelling story. The shape of their semicircular canals, the organ of balance, is remarkably similar to that of modern, highly agile animals like birds and, crucially, pterosaurs. This indicates they possessed a sophisticated sense of spatial awareness and balance essential for navigating a complex three-dimensional environment, whether leaping between rocks or, perhaps, branches. They were not yet flyers, but they were neurologically and anatomically primed for a life that demanded superb coordination, a prerequisite for the ultimate acrobatic act, taking to the air. The leap from a controlled glide to powered flight requires a profound reinvention of the reptilian body plan. This is where the true engineering of the pterosaur begins. The skeleton, once a heavy scaffold, must become a lightweight aerodynamic frame. The solution was a network of hollow, air-filled bones, a feature convergent with birds, which provided immense strength with minimal weight. The powerhouse for flight, the chest and shoulder muscles, needed a solid anchor. This led to the fusion of the shoulder blades and vertebrae into a rigid structure called the notarium, and the development of a deep, keeled sternum or breastbone to support the massive pectoralis muscles. But the single most radical innovation, the feature that defines a pterosaur, was the evolution of the wing itself. It was not formed of feathers, nor was it a membrane stretched across all fingers like a bat's. Instead, one finger on each hand, the fourth digit, began to elongate at an astonishing rate, destined to become the primary spar for a vast, leathery wing membrane. Imagine, then, a creature on the precipice of this evolutionary leap. A late Triassic protopterosaur, perhaps, perched on a cliffside overlooking a vast, misty river valley at dawn. It carries the legacy of its Lagerpetid ancestors in its keen senses and long legs. Its bones are lighter, its chest deeper, and its fourth finger is now unmistakably elongated, supporting a developing patagium. For generations, its kind has leaped and glided, mastering the currents of the air. But today is different. A gust of wind sweeps up the cliff face. Driven by instinct, by the ingrained neurological wiring for acrobatics, it does not just leap, it pushes. It thrusts its forelimbs downward in a powerful stroke, the membranes catching the air, generating not just lift, but propulsion. For a fleeting, revolutionary moment, it is not falling, it is flying. This single, awkward flap is a momentous event in the history of life on Earth. A reptile has intentionally broken the bonds of gravity. The sky would never be the same again. The late Triassic, a world of giants is dawning. On the arid supercontinent of Pangaea, the first dinosaurs are staking their claim, their footsteps beginning to echo through the ages. Yet this is a world defined by its boundaries. Life thrives in the water and spreads across the land, but the skies remain a vast, silent frontier. The air is the domain of insects, a kingdom of buzzing wings unchallenged by any vertebrate. On the ground, however, a revolution is quietly brewing within a group of reptiles known as the archosaurs, the ruling reptiles. Among them, small, nimble creatures are experimenting with new ways to move. Animals like Lagerpetidae, no larger than a chicken, dart across the landscape on two legs, their bodies engineered for speed and agility. Their bipedal stance frees their forelimbs from the burden of locomotion, a seemingly small change that will have monumental consequences. These restless, energetic animals carry within their anatomy a hidden potential, a blueprint for a conquest that no one, looking at this terrestrial world, could ever predict. For paleontologists, the origin of pterosaurs has long been a profound enigma. In the fossil record, they appear abruptly, already masters of the air. The first known pterosaurs from the late Triassic are not clumsy beginners. They are fully realized flyers, complete with sophisticated wings and lightweight skeletons. There are no obvious transitional proto-flyers to bridge the gap from their terrestrial ancestors. This puzzle has forced scientists to look for more subtle clues, for relatives hiding in plain sight. The search has led to a group of small archosaurs called Lagerpetidae. Fossils like Dromaeomeron and Ixalerpeton, once thought to be early dinosaur relatives, reveal a surprising mosaic of features upon closer inspection. Their inner ear structure, responsible for balance, is remarkably similar to that of pterosaurs. The shape of their brain case and certain bones in their limbs also whisper of a shared heritage. These creatures, part of the larger group Pterosauromorpha, are now considered the sister group to pterosaurs, their closest known land-dwelling cousins, providing the first solid clues to who the sky dragons were before they had wings. Before a single flap, the ancestors of pterosaurs were already equipped with a remarkable biological toolkit, a set of pre-adaptations for a life they didn't yet lead. The most critical of these was hidden within their very bones. Like modern birds, their skeletons were pneumaticized. The bones were not solid and heavy, but hollowed out and reinforced with internal struts, invaded by extensions of the respiratory system. This made them incredibly lightweight for their size, a crucial prerequisite for becoming airborne. Furthermore, their breathing was extraordinarily efficient. They likely possessed a system of air sacs, allowing for a one-way flow of oxygen-rich air through the lungs. This high-performance respiratory engine could power the immense metabolic demands of flight. Freed by a bipedal posture, the forelimbs were no longer just for walking. They were now unbound, limbs of pure potential, ready to be repurposed for a radically new function. A lightweight frame, a supercharged respiratory system, and free forelimbs, these were the three pillars upon which the dream of flight would be built. But the defining innovation, the feature that transformed a ground dweller into a sky dragon, was the wing. And it was unlike anything that had ever existed. This was not a wing of feathers, but of skin, muscle, and fiber, anchored by a single, impossibly elongated finger. The fourth digit of the hand, a finger that remains modest in nearly all other reptiles, began to stretch, generation by generation, into a colossal spar. This was the pterosaur's signature. The wing membrane, or patagium, was a marvel of biological engineering. Far from being a simple flap of skin, it was a complex, living airfoil. It was reinforced by a dense network of fine, stiff fibers called actinofibrils, giving it strength and preventing it from tearing. Its shape could be actively controlled by muscles in the arm and a unique forward-pointing wrist bone called the pteroid, which supported a front membrane. This structure allowed for precise adjustments in flight, changing the wing's camber and tension on the fly. It was a soft tissue miracle, a living sail that turned a limb into a wing. How did this incredible transformation occur? For decades, two competing scenarios dominated the debate: trees down versus ground up. The trees down hypothesis proposed that pterosaur ancestors were small tree-climbing animals that first learned to glide, parachuting from branch to branch to escape predators or ambush prey. Over time, these glides became longer and more controlled, eventually evolving into powered flapping flight. The ground-up theory envisioned fast-running terrestrial predators using their proto-wings to generate extra lift while leaping after insects, or to gain traction and stability during high-speed chases. Modern analysis of their anatomy, however, suggests a more nuanced story. The claws of early pterosaurs and their relatives seem well suited for grasping and climbing on rough surfaces like tree bark or rock faces. Their powerful hind limbs, inherited from their Lagerpetidae cousins, also made them adept leapers. It's likely their journey to the sky wasn't a simple choice between trees or the ground, but a versatile strategy of climbing, leaping, and gliding, exploiting every dimension of their complex Triassic environment. Mastering powered flight is not just a feat of muscle and bone, it is a computational challenge of immense complexity. To navigate a three-dimensional world at speed requires a brain that can process a torrent of sensory information in real time. By using CT scanners to peer inside the fossilized skulls of pterosaurs, scientists have been able to reconstruct the shape and size of their brains. The results are astounding. Their optic lobes, the regions that process vision, were enormous, indicating they had exceptionally sharp eyesight, critical for spotting prey and avoiding collisions. But the most revealing feature is the flocculus, a part of the cerebellum. In pterosaurs, the flocculus was colossal, proportionally larger than in almost any other vertebrate, including birds. This neural structure is vital for coordinating movement and maintaining balance by integrating signals from the eyes, inner ear, and the body's limbs. For a pterosaur, the flocculus was likely processing sensory feedback directly from the vast wing membranes, making the wing an extension of the brain itself, a sensitive, responsive surface that felt the air. And so, all the pieces fall into place. A lightweight, hollow skeleton, lungs that work like a supercharger, forelimbs freed from the earth, a wing of unparalleled design, and a brain rewired for the sky. On a Triassic cliff edge or from the branch of a tall conifer, a small pterosauromorph makes a leap. But this time is different. It is not just a glide to the ground below. Spurred by the instinct to escape a threat or the drive to catch a buzzing insect, it does something revolutionary. It flaps. A frantic, powerful contraction of muscle pulls the wing down, not just to slow its descent, but to generate thrust. For a moment, it overcomes gravity. That single, desperate flap is the culmination of millions of years of evolution. It is the leap that becomes a flight. The moment a reptile breaks the bonds of the terrestrial world and claims the air. The silent sky now has a new voice, a new master. The dawn of the pterosaurs has arrived. To conquer the sky is to defy gravity, to rewrite the very rules of life on land. For the archosaurs of the Triassic, the world was defined by the ground beneath their feet. But one lineage dared to dream of the air. This was not a gradual creep towards the heavens. It was a biological quantum leap. The emergence of the pterosaur represents one of the most audacious and comprehensive redesigns in the history of vertebrate life. It was a complete re-engineering of the reptilian body plan, a new anatomical blueprint drawn for an entirely new dimension of existence. Every bone, every muscle, every sinew was reimagined for a single breathtaking purpose: flight. But how did this happen? How did a creature whose ancestors were bound to the earth develop the radical anatomy required to become the first true lord of the air? The answer lies not in a single innovation, but in a suite of perfectly integrated adaptations, a symphony of evolutionary genius that would transform a reptile into a sky dragon. The centerpiece of this new flying machine was its wing, an invention unlike anything that had come before or has evolved since. It was not a wing of feathers like a bird's, nor was it a hand of splayed fingers like a bat's. The pterosaur wing was a masterwork of biological engineering, constructed from a membrane of skin and tissue called the patagium. This tough, flexible sheet was stretched taut not by the entire arm, but by a single extraordinary digit, the fourth finger. This finger, homologous to our own ring finger, was elongated to an almost unbelievable degree, forming the wing's entire leading-edge spar. Meanwhile, the first three fingers remained small, separate, and tipped with sharp claws, likely used for climbing, clinging to cliffs, or grasping prey. This unique arrangement created a lightweight, aerodynamic surface that was both vast in area and incredibly strong, capable of generating the powerful lift needed to carry the animal aloft. It was a simple yet profoundly effective solution to the problem of creating a wing from a reptilian hand. But a revolutionary wing is useless if it cannot lift its owner. The second great challenge of flight is weight. To break the bonds of Earth, the pterosaur skeleton had to become a paradox, immensely strong, yet impossibly light. The solution was a marvel of internal architecture. Their bones were hollow. This was not a simple emptiness. The interior was a matrix of wafer-thin struts and braces of bone, a structure known as pneumaticity. This lattice-like construction provided exceptional rigidity and strength, capable of withstanding the immense pressures and torques of powered flight, all while minimizing mass. It was the biological equivalent of a carbon fiber frame. This adaptation was so extreme that pterosaur fossils are often found flattened and crushed. The very lightness that gave them the sky made their remains fragile over the eons. Their bones are a ghostly testament to a body built not for the ages, but for the air, sacrificing geological permanence for aerodynamic perfection. It was this skeletal airiness that truly unlocked the potential of their wings. Light bones and broad wings are the chassis of a flyer, but they need an engine. Powered flight is one of the most energetically expensive forms of locomotion in the animal kingdom. It requires a biological powerhouse capable of generating immense and sustained force. In pterosaurs, this power came from enormous pectoral muscles that anchored to a deep, keeled breastbone, or sternum. These muscles, responsible for the critical wing downstroke, were proportionally massive, indicating that these were not passive gliders waiting for a breeze. They were active, flapping flyers that generated their own thrust. Such relentless muscular activity burns a tremendous amount of energy, which in turn demands a high, stable body temperature. This leads to a profound conclusion. Pterosaurs were almost certainly warm-blooded. Unlike their cold-blooded reptilian cousins, they possessed a high-octane, endothermic metabolism to fuel their aerial lifestyle. They were a furnace in the sky, a notion supported by a remarkable discovery that would forever change our perception of these animals. For decades, pterosaurs were imagined as naked, leathery reptiles exposed to the elements. But exquisitely preserved fossils from sites like the Karatau Mountains in Kazakhstan and Daohugo in China revealed a stunning truth. Their bodies were covered in a dense, fuzzy coat. These structures, known as pycnofibers, were not scales, and they were not true feathers. They were a unique integument entirely their own, fine, hair-like filaments that formed a soft, insulating pelt. The implications of this discovery were immense. A full-body coat of insulation serves one primary purpose: to trap body heat. This was the smoking gun for warm-bloodedness. An animal that invests so much energy in generating its own heat cannot afford to lose it to the surrounding air. The pycnofibers prove that pterosaurs maintained a high internal body temperature, fueling their powerful muscles and active lives. Far from being scaly, lizard-like creatures, these were dynamic, fuzzy animals, more akin to a bat than a crocodile in their physiology and appearance. Mastering the air requires more than just lift and power. It demands precision and control. For the early long-tailed pterosaurs, known as rhamphorhynchoids, stability was paramount. Their most conspicuous flight instrument was a long, stiff tail, often ending in a complex diamond-shaped vein of skin. This wasn't a passive appendage. It acted as a rudder and a stabilizer, allowing the animal to make fine adjustments to its pitch and yaw, preventing it from tumbling out of the sky. It provided crucial aerodynamic balance, much like the tail on a kite. At the other end of the body, another feature was emerging that would become a hallmark of later pterosaurs: the head crest. In early forms like Dimorphodon, the skull was deep but relatively unadorned. However, these structures would, in their descendants, blossom into an incredible array of shapes and sizes. Even in these early stages, a slightly enlarged or uniquely shaped skull may have acted as a forward rudder or airfoil, assisting in steering and stability during flight. The elongated fourth finger, the fibrous patagium, the hollow skeleton, the powerful flight engine, the warm-blooded metabolism, and the delicate control surfaces. Each element was a marvel in itself. But their true genius lay in their perfect integration. Together, they formed a flying machine of breathtaking sophistication. This was not a creature of compromise. It was a purpose-built aerial predator, appearing in the fossil record with its flight adaptations already fully formed and exquisitely functional. From the moment they first appear, these were not clumsy experimental gliders. They were confident, powered flyers, perfectly attuned to their environment. The pterosaur body plan was a triumph of evolutionary innovation, a bold new direction for vertebrate life that paid off spectacularly. This anatomical blueprint would prove so successful that it would carry them through the age of dinosaurs, allowing them to dominate the skies of the Mesozoic for an astonishing 150 million years, the undisputed dragons of a prehistoric sky. To conquer the air was a monumental evolutionary achievement. But for the first pterosaurs, this new realm of endless blue presented a fundamental challenge: how to fuel this energetically expensive lifestyle. Flight demands immense calories, a constant supply of energy to power muscles that had never before been used to soar. The success of these pioneers was not just in their wings, but in their mouths. The story of what they ate is a tale of incredible adaptation, a crucial chapter in their ascent to becoming masters of the Mesozoic skies. To understand how they thrived, we must look past the revolutionary wings and focus on the intricate and varied architecture of their jaws and teeth. Here, in the fossilized bone and enamel, lie the secrets to their survival and the blueprint for their diversification. This was not a dynasty built on a single food source, but an empire founded on the ability to exploit every ecological opportunity the world had to offer. Our investigation begins in the late Triassic with one of the earliest known pterosaurs, Eudimorphodon. Its name means true dimorphic tooth, and it is in these teeth that we find our first crucial clues. Unlike many reptiles with simple, conical teeth, Eudimorphodon possessed a remarkably complex dental toolkit. At the front of its jaws were long, fang-like teeth, perfectly suited for seizing and holding struggling prey. Further back, the jaw was lined with smaller, more intricate teeth, each bearing multiple sharp points or cusps. This complex, multi-part dentition suggests a generalist hunter, one not locked into a single type of food. For decades, paleontologists speculated on its diet, but the definitive proof was hiding in plain sight. Preserved within the fossilized stomach cavity of one remarkable Italian specimen were the scales of an ancient fish called Parafolidorphorus. Here was the smoking gun. Eudimorphodon was, at least in part, a fish-eater, using its dental arsenal to snatch prey from the water and process it effectively. As the Triassic gave way to the Jurassic, pterosaur evolution accelerated, branching out into new forms and new niches. In the twilight forests of what is now Germany, a very different hunter emerged, a Neurognathus. Small, with a wingspan of only about 50 centimeters, its appearance was unlike any pterosaur we have seen so far. It possessed a short, wide skull, enormous forward-facing eyes, and a mouth that could open into a cavernous gape. Its teeth were reduced to tiny, sharp pegs, not for piercing or slicing, but for gripping. This suite of features points to one specific lifestyle, an aerial insectivore. Like a modern bat or nightjar, a neurognathus was a creature of the dusk, its large eyes adapted for low-light conditions. It would have flitted through the dense Jurassic canopy with incredible agility, its wide mouth acting as a biological net, scooping up moths, beetles, and other large insects on the wing. This was a new level of specialization, a pterosaur perfectly engineered to harvest the rich protein source buzzing through the prehistoric night. While a neurognathus mastered the forest air, another lineage was perfecting the art of hunting over open water. Along the shallow, island-dotted seas of the Jurassic, Rhamphorhynchus became one of the era's most successful predators. This pterosaur was a dedicated piscivore, a fisherman of unparalleled design. Its long, slender jaws were armed with a fearsome array of needle-sharp teeth that angled forwards. When its mouth closed, these teeth from the upper and lower jaws interlaced to form an inescapable cage, a perfect trap for slippery, wriggling fish. Fossil evidence overwhelmingly supports this diet. Specimens have been found with fish remains in their gut contents, and in one of the most astonishing fossils ever discovered, a Rhamphorhynchus is preserved locked in a death struggle with a large predatory fish, Aspidorhynchus, which had attempted to swallow it. This dramatic snapshot from the past provides undeniable proof of its place in the marine food web. Rhamphorhynchus didn't just live near the water, its entire existence was intricately bound to the bounty of the sea. Predation, however, was not the only path to success. The incredible adaptability of pterosaurs saw them explore more unconventional feeding strategies, moving beyond active hunting. Consider the rich ecosystems of prehistoric estuaries and tidal flats. These environments teemed with life. Not just fish, but a vast array of small invertebrates burrowed in the mud and sand. It is highly probable that some early pterosaur lineages evolved to exploit this reliable food source. While the most famous filter feeder, Pterodaustro, with its bristle-like teeth, appears much later in the Cretaceous, the evolutionary groundwork was laid here in the Jurassic. We can envision small, long-beaked pterosaurs, perhaps resembling modern shorebirds like sandpipers or avocets, wading through the shallows. They would have used their sensitive snouts to probe the soft sediment, searching for worms, small crustaceans, and mollusks. This move away from high-speed aerial pursuit and into methodical foraging demonstrates a critical step in their diversification, proving that pterosaurs could thrive by being meticulous gatherers as well as fearsome hunters. Not all pterosaurs confined their search for food to the air and water. On the rugged, rocky coastlines of early Jurassic Britain lived Dimorphodon, a pterosaur whose anatomy suggests a far more versatile and perhaps more terrestrial approach to feeding. Its most striking feature was its skull, deep, robust, and reminiscent of a modern puffin's, but armed with two distinct types of teeth, giving it its name. At the front of its powerful jaws were long, sharp fangs, ideal for snatching prey. But behind them were much smaller, flattened, blade-like teeth, suited for shearing. This powerful and varied dental arrangement suggests Dimorphodon was an opportunist. While it could certainly fly, its stout limbs and strong build indicate it may have been comfortable on the ground. It could have hunted small reptiles, shrew-like mammals, or even large insects in the undergrowth. Furthermore, that strong jaw could have been used to process tougher food, or even to scavenge from carcasses found along the shoreline. Dimorphodon breaks the mold, showing us a pterosaur that was not just a graceful flyer, but a tough, adaptable survivor. The evidence is clear. The initial explosion of pterosaur diversity in the Triassic and Jurassic was driven by a parallel explosion in diet. From the generalist hunting of Eudomorphodon to the specialized insectivory of a neurognathus, From the master fishermen like Rhamphorhynchus to the terrestrial opportunism of Dimorphodon, these early sky dragons were relentless innovators. They did not simply evolve to fly, they evolved to eat. By adapting their anatomy to consume fish, insects, terrestrial vertebrates, and shoreline invertebrates, they conquered nearly every available food source. This dietary flexibility was the key to their global expansion and their long-term success. It prevented them from being locked into a single, vulnerable ecological niche and instead provided the foundation for their spectacular 150 million-year reign. This taste for the skies was, in reality, a taste for everything the world had to offer, setting the stage for the even more varied and sometimes bizarre pterosaurs yet to come. The late Triassic world was a world of new opportunities. Life was rebounding from a mass extinction. The first dinosaurs were appearing, but the skies belonged to a new kind of reptile. We're not in the age of giants yet. The first pterosaurs, like the delicate Priondactylus, were small, some no larger than a modern blackbird. For these pioneers, the world was a banquet and a battlefield. Every day was a relentless search for sustenance, a high-stakes game of survival played out on the wing. Their small size was not a weakness, it was their key. It allowed them to exploit niches unavailable to the larger terrestrial reptiles below. Their challenge was to convert the revolutionary gift of flight into a full stomach. How did these fragile-looking creatures become the world's first vertebrate aerial predators? The answer lies in a suite of remarkable adaptations and a surprising diversity of hunting strategies, honed in the crucible of the Triassic period. Their story is not one of brute force, but of precision, speed, and ingenuity. The Triassic air was thick with life. Insects, some grown to astonishing sizes in the oxygen-rich atmosphere, filled the skies. For an agile flyer, this was an endless airborne feast. Pterosaurs like Eudomorphodon were perfectly equipped for this pursuit. Their most remarkable feature was a complex and fearsome set of teeth. Unlike many later pterosaurs, Eudomorphodon possessed a dental arsenal of fangs, multi-cusped teak teeth, and smaller piercing teeth, a combination indicating a varied diet, but one well-suited for crunching through the tough exoskeletons of large insects. Imagine the scene. A Eudomorphodon launches from a cycad, its leathery wings catching the air. With stereoscopic vision, it locks on to a giant dragonfly. A burst of speed, a sharp, agile turn that would be impossible for any other reptile of its time, and a final, decisive snap of its jaws. The hunt is over in an instant. This high-speed, three-dimensional chase was a revolutionary form of predation. The pterosaurs were not just flying, they were weaponizing the sky itself, turning the air into their exclusive hunting ground for a buffet of invertebrates. The mastery of the skies did not mean an abandonment of the land. Fossil trackways reveal a crucial detail. Pterosaurs were also capable quadrupeds, walking on all fours with their wings neatly folded. This terrestrial agility opened up another world of prey. For a hunter like Dimorphodon, with its large head and robust jaws, the forest floor was a place of opportunity. While its flight was likely powerful, its sturdy limbs suggest it was equally at home in the undergrowth. Here it could stalk the small creatures that scurried beneath the giant ferns. Early lizards, primitive mammals no larger than shrews, and the young of other reptiles. We can envision it moving with a surprising gait, a low-slung predator scanning the leaf litter. A rustle, a flash of movement. The pterosaur lunges, its powerful jaws closing on its unsuspecting victim. This was not the graceful ballet of the skies, but a more grounded, opportunistic form of predation. It demonstrates that the earliest pterosaurs were not one-dimensional hunters. They were adaptable survivors, capable of exploiting resources both in the air and on the ground. A versatility that was fundamental to their initial success and global expansion. While insects and small terrestrial animals provided a steady diet, the world's vast coastlines, rivers, and lakes offered a richer, more concentrated source of protein, fish. The move towards piscivory marked a pivotal moment in pterosaur evolution. The evidence for this is not just anatomical, but startlingly direct. Within the fossilized abdominal cavity of a Eudimorphodon specimen, paleontologists discovered the scales of a fish named Paraphilidophorus. This is a paleontological smoking gun, undeniable proof of its diet. Hunting fish from the air requires exceptional skill. It demands pinpoint accuracy and specialized equipment. The teeth of Eudimorphodon, long, sharp, and interlocking, were perfect for the job, forming a cage from which no slippery fish could escape. We see it soaring low over a calm Triassic sea, its reflection rippling on the surface. Its keen eyes, capable of piercing the water's glare, spot a shoal of fish just below. It doesn't dive like a gannet, but rather skims the surface, dipping its head with split-second timing to snatch a fish in its toothy jaws. This was a new and highly efficient way of life, one that would be perfected by its descendants for millions of years. To hunt on the wing is to solve 1,000 complex aerodynamic and biological problems at once. The pterosaur body was a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering, with every element fine-tuned for a predatory lifestyle. Let's begin with the eyes. Fossilized skulls reveal large eye sockets, often angled forward to provide the overlapping fields of view necessary for stereoscopic vision. This depth perception was critical for judging distances to fast-moving prey, whether it was an insect in the air or a fish in the water. The wings themselves were more than simple gliders. Composed of a membrane of skin and muscle fibers called actinofibrils, they were dynamic airfoils. By subtly adjusting the tension and shape of the membrane with its long wing finger, a pterosaur could change the camber of its wing, allowing for remarkable agility, tight turns, and sudden bursts of speed or braking. And then there were the jaws. Early forms like Pycnosaurus had simple, sharp, conical teeth, ideal for piercing insect carapaces or gripping small vertebrates. This combination of sensory acuity, aerodynamic control, and lethal weaponry made the pterosaur a truly formidable hunter, a creature that had perfectly integrated its anatomy with its aerial ambition. The early success of pterosaurs was rooted in their dietary flexibility. They were not specialists locked into a single food source, but generalists who could capitalize on a wide array of small prey. This adaptability allowed them to thrive in diverse environments, from inland forests to coastal lagoons. In the treetops, a small pterosaur might snatch a lizard-like reptile from a branch, a display of aerial maneuverability and precise timing. In coastal areas, they likely scavenged along the shoreline at low tide, probing for mollusks and crustaceans in the wet sand, much like modern shorebirds. This broadens our picture of their ecological role. They weren't just the Triassic equivalent of hawks or dragonflies. They were also like kingfishers, shrews, and sandpipers, all rolled into one revolutionary body plan. The fossil record supports this view, showing a variety of tooth shapes and skull sizes among the earliest species, each hinting at a slightly different dietary preference. This ability to avoid overspecialization was a key survival strategy in the volatile world of the late Triassic. It ensured that no matter how the environment shifted, there was always something on the menu for the hunters on the wing. The hunting strategies developed by these early pioneers were a resounding evolutionary success. By conquering the air, pterosaurs gained access to a three-dimensional world of resources that was, for millions of years, theirs and theirs alone. Their ability to hunt insects, fish, and small terrestrial animals gave them a critical advantage in the competitive Triassic ecosystems. They were not just surviving, they were thriving, diversifying into a spectacular array of forms that would soon populate every continent on Earth. The foundations laid by small, agile hunters like Eudimorphodon and Priondactylus paved the way for the later giants of the Cretaceous like the colossal Quetzalcoatlus. But the fundamental principle remained the same: Flight as a tool for predation. As the Triassic period drew to a close, the skies were no longer empty. They were patrolled by these flying reptiles, the undisputed masters of the air. Their shadows fell across the landscape, a constant reminder that a new dynasty of predators had taken flight, a dynasty that would rule the heavens for the next 150 million years, an enduring legacy of the first hunters on the wing. The late Triassic, a world of intense and radical experimentation. Life on land is bursting with new forms, but the sky, for eons the sole domain of insects, has a new master. These are the first true vertebrate aviators, the pterosaurs. Creatures like Eudimorphodon, with its modest wingspan and a mouth bristling with specialized teeth, represent a bold evolutionary leap. They have unlocked the vast open highways of the air, a realm seemingly free from the brutal competition below. Gliding on thermal updrafts over primeval coastlines, they experience a perspective no other reptile has ever known. Yet, this newfound freedom is a fragile illusion. The sky may be a sanctuary, but it is not a home. Pterosaurs must return to the earth to rest, to nest, and to feed. And the world they descend into is not empty. It is a far more ancient and dangerous arena, ruled by predators who are rapidly evolving their own deadly arsenals. For these pioneers of flight, every landing is a gamble. Every moment on the ground a tense negotiation with a world that has not yet learned to fear what comes from above. On the ground, the rules are different. Here, speed and power reign supreme, and a new dynasty of terrestrial carnivores is on the rise. Among the most successful is Coelophysis, a theropod dinosaur built for the chase. Lightly constructed, with hollow bones and a slender, agile frame, it is a marvel of predatory efficiency. These were not solitary hunters. Fossil evidence from sites like Ghost Ranch in New Mexico suggests they congregated in large groups. Moving as a coordinated pack, they were capable of overwhelming much larger prey. For a pterosaur, a creature adapted for the elegance of flight rather than the brutality of ground combat, an encounter with a pack of Coelophysis would be utterly terrifying. Their keen eyesight would track the flying reptile's descent, their sharp minds calculating the point of landing. A grounded pterosaur, with its awkward gait and delicate wing membranes, stood little chance against the rush of these fleet-footed killers. The air offered escape, but the land offered only a swift and violent end, a stark reminder that gravity was the ally of the earthbound. But the threat was not always a full-scale assault from a pack of large predators. Danger also lurked in smaller, more insidious forms. Meet Procompsognathus, a theropod no larger than a chicken, but armed with the same predatory instincts as its giant relatives. These tiny carnivores were the opportunists of the Triassic world, thriving in the shadows of the giants. They were likely incredibly fast, darting through the undergrowth in pursuit of insects, lizards, and any other small creature they could overpower. For a pterosaur, the threat from Procompsognathus was one of proximity and surprise. A pterosaur nest, often situated on the ground or low cliffs for stability, would be a tempting target for these agile thieves. They could slip through defenses, snatching eggs or vulnerable hatchlings in a flash. Even an adult, preoccupied with feeding on a carcass or resting in the shade, could be startled by the sudden, sharp attack of these diminutive dinosaurs. They represent a fundamental truth of the prehistoric world, that peril is not always measured in size, and that even the masters of the sky must remain vigilant against the smallest of terrors from below. To survive, many early pterosaurs, like Pycnosaurus, became expert anglers, their diet primarily consisting of fish. This evolutionary strategy, however, forced them into one of the most dangerous zones in the entire ecosystem, the water's edge. This boundary between land, air, and water was a hunting ground for a host of specialized predators. As a pycnosaurus swooped low, skimming the surface to snatch an unsuspecting fish, it was momentarily predictable, its flight path a straight line of vulnerability. And lurking in these shallow waters were patient, heavily armored ambush predators. Chief among them were the pterosaurs, crocodile-like reptiles that were, in fact, only distantly related. With nostrils positioned high on their skulls near their eyes, they could lie almost completely submerged, virtually invisible. A slight ripple on the surface was the only clue to the powerful jaws and rows of conical teeth waiting just inches below. For the pterosaur, a moment's miscalculation, a dip of a wing too low, could mean being dragged down into a watery grave from which there was no escape. The threats were not confined to the shallows. The Triassic seas and freshwater systems teemed with strange and formidable marine reptiles. One of the most widespread and successful was Nothosaurus. This was a creature of two worlds, equally at home in the water and on land. In the water, it was a supremely graceful hunter. Its long, flexible neck and jaws filled with interlocking needle-sharp teeth were perfectly adapted for snaring fish and cephalopods. It propelled itself with powerful webbed feet, a transitional form between terrestrial legs and fully developed flippers. This amphibious nature made it a uniquely versatile predator. It could hunt pterosaurs in the open water, striking from below if one was unlucky enough to fall in. But it could also haul itself onto rocky outcrops and shorelines to bask, the very same places a pterosaur might choose to rest. A resting pterosaur, believing itself safe from land-based dinosaurs, could find itself ambushed by a hunter emerging from the waves, a terrifying predator that blurred the line between aquatic and terrestrial peril. Beyond the coastal hunters, the open ocean held titans of a scale that is difficult to comprehend. This was the age of the first giant ichthyosaurs. Creatures like Shonosaurus reached lengths of over 15 meters, making them among the largest marine reptiles of all time. An adult Shonosaurus would likely have had little interest in actively hunting a small pterosaur. Its prey was squid and large shoals of fish. But in the prehistoric world, danger does not always come from malice. The sheer presence of such a creature was a force of nature. A Shonosaurus surfacing for air could create a wake powerful enough to swamp a pterosaur resting on the water's surface. A pod of these giants engaged in a feeding frenzy could inadvertently injure or even swallow a low-flying pterosaur caught in the chaos. This was an impersonal threat, the peril of scale. It served as a potent reminder to the pterosaurs that while they may have been conquering the skies, the seas below belonged to leviathans, and to venture too close was to risk being erased by an indifference born of immense size and power. The gauntlet was relentless. From swift pack hunters on land to armored ambushers at the water's edge, and from versatile marine reptiles to indifferent ocean giants, the first pterosaurs were besieged from below. This constant, unyielding pressure was a powerful engine of natural selection. It was not enough to simply fly. They had to fly better. This evolutionary crucible favored adaptations that minimized time spent on the vulnerable ground. It rewarded greater speed and agility in the air to evade lunging predators from the water. Over millions of years, these pressures would sculpt the pterosaur lineage into an astonishing array of forms. Wings became more refined, bodies more specialized for sustained flight, and senses more attuned to the dangers below. The constant threat from the terrestrial and aquatic realms forced the pterosaurs to perfect their mastery of the air. It is a testament to their incredible resilience that they not only survived this onslaught but thrived, diversifying and dominating the skies for the next 150 million years, forever shaped by the peril from below. For over 150 million years, the pterosaurs had commanded the skies. From their humble beginnings in the Triassic, they had evolved, adapted, and conquered the air itself. But it was in the Cretaceous period, the final act of the Mesozoic era, that their dynasty reached its spectacular zenith. This was their golden age. The long-tailed rhamphorhynchoids of the Jurassic had largely vanished, giving way to the explosive diversification of the short-tailed pterodactyloids. The skies were now filled with an unprecedented array of shapes and sizes. Vast flocks of pteranodon, with wingspans matching small aircraft, soared over the newly formed inland seas. In the forests of ancient China and Brazil, bizarre, crested forms like tapagera sported sails of soft tissue, perhaps used in elaborate courtship displays. From creatures no bigger than a sparrow to giants that dwarfed a giraffe, the pterosaurs had colonized every aerial niche imaginable. They were the undisputed masters of the Cretaceous firmament, a testament to evolution's power to innovate and dominate. Their long reign seemed unassailable, their forms perfected by millions of years of airborne supremacy. Yet, even among this staggering diversity, one group emerged that pushed the biological limits of flight to their very edge. They were the Azhdarchids, and they were giants. The most famous of these titans, Quetzalcoatlus northropi from North America, was a creature of unbelievable scale. Standing on the ground, it was as tall as a modern giraffe, with a wingspan of over 10 meters or 33 feet. For decades, paleontologists imagined these behemoths as gentle gliders, soaring high above the landscape. But a more revolutionary and terrifying picture has emerged. Fossil trackways and functional anatomy reveal a different lifestyle. Azhdarchids were not primarily soarers or fishers. They were terrestrial stalkers. With their incredibly long, stiff necks and sharp, spear-like beaks, they strode across the prehistoric plains on all fours, hunting for small dinosaurs and other vertebrates. They were the apex predators of their environments, the stork from hell of the Cretaceous. And when they took to the air, launching themselves with a powerful leap from their folded wings, they were capable of traversing entire continents, flying for thousands of kilometers in a single journey. They were the largest flying animals of all time, a final magnificent flourish of pterosaur evolution. The success of the pterosaurs was built on specialization. Rather than a monolithic group of flying lizards, they were a branching tree of endless forms, each adapted to a specific lifestyle. This niche partitioning allowed them to thrive across the globe in a multitude of environments. In the shallow lagoons of what is now South America, Pterodaustro employed a unique feeding strategy. Its lower jaw was lined with over 1,000 fine, bristle-like teeth, forming a perfect sieve. It would wade through the water, skimming for tiny crustaceans and plankton, a Mesozoic flamingo. In contrast, Tapagera and its relatives, the Tapagerids, possessed deep, toothless beaks and often enormous, bizarre head crests made of bone and soft tissue. Once thought to be fish eaters, evidence now suggests they may have been frugivores, using their beaks to pluck fruits and seeds in the prehistoric forests, with their crests acting as vibrant signals for species recognition and mate selection. This incredible variety demonstrates that pterosaurs were not just a single evolutionary experiment. They were a dynasty of specialists, adapting their anatomy and behavior to exploit every available resource, from the smallest plankton in the sea to the ripest fruit on the branch. But the pterosaurs were no longer the only vertebrates in the sky. A new group of flyers had been steadily evolving in their shadow, the birds. Descended from small, feathered dinosaurs, the first birds took to the air in the Jurassic and had been diversifying ever since. Throughout the Cretaceous, they shared the skies with their pterosaur cousins. For a long time, it was thought that this was a story of direct competition, with the supposedly superior birds driving the pterosaurs to extinction. The reality, however, is far more complex and nuanced. Early birds were generally small, crow-sized or smaller, likely competing with the smaller pterosaur species for insects and other food sources. This pressure may have contributed to a decline in small pterosaur diversity during the late Cretaceous. In response, pterosaurs appear to have ceded the small flyer niches and doubled down on what they did best, getting big. By the end of the Cretaceous, the pterosaurs that remained were almost exclusively medium to giant-sized forms, a niche for which the birds of the time offered no competition. The sky was a divided kingdom, with birds ruling the undergrowth and smaller airways, while the pterosaur titans commanded the open skies above. As the final millennia of the Cretaceous ticked away, the world was changing. Continents continued their slow drift, sea levels fluctuated, and volcanic activity reshaped landscapes. While the giant Agile reigned supreme, overall pterosaur diversity seems to have been on a downward trend for several million years. The once crowded skies were becoming emptier. The smaller, specialized families that had flourished earlier were dwindling or had vanished entirely. In their place, the last great dynasty, the Agile, established a near-global monopoly on the large flyer niche. From the plains of North America with Quetzalcoatlus to the island ecosystems of Europe with the robust-necked Hatsugoprex, these giants were the final, awe-inspiring representatives of their lineage. They were the culmination of 150 million years of aerial evolution, perfectly adapted and utterly dominant in their roles. For a casual observer at the end of the Mesozoic, it would have been inconceivable to imagine a world without them. They were the ultimate rulers of the sky, the final and most magnificent dragons the world would ever know. Then, in a single catastrophic moment, 150 million years of aerial dominion came to an end. 66 million years ago, an asteroid more than 10 kilometers wide, traveling at an unthinkable velocity, struck the Earth in the shallow seas of the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact unleashed energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs. The immediate effects were apocalyptic, a world-spanning shockwave, continent-sized firestorms, and colossal tsunamis. But the long-term consequences were even more deadly. Trillions of tons of pulverized rock and soot were blasted into the atmosphere, shrouding the planet in a thick blanket of darkness. Sunlight was blocked for months, perhaps years, causing global temperatures to plummet and photosynthesis to cease. Plant life died on a massive scale. The entire global food web collapsed from the bottom up. For the giant pterosaurs, the end would have been swift. Their food sources, whether small dinosaurs on the ground or fish in the seas, vanished almost overnight. Their vast wings, so perfectly evolved for soaring, offered no defense against a sky filled with acid rain and choking ash. The world that had sustained them for eons was gone, replaced by a toxic, dying planet. The sky dragons, alongside their non-avian dinosaur cousins, faced an extinction they could not fly away from. The silence that followed was absolute. The great wings that had beaten the Mesozoic air for millions of generations were stilled forever. The reign of the first flying vertebrates was over. Their extinction was total, leaving behind no living descendants. But their legacy is far from one of failure. For 150 million years, 3 times longer than the age of mammals has lasted so far, they were an incredible evolutionary success story. They pioneered the incredible biological adaptations necessary for powered flight, charting a course that only 2 other vertebrate groups, birds and bats, would ever follow. They were a breathtaking example of life's ability to push boundaries, to conquer new realms, and to produce forms of magnificent, almost unbelievable beauty and scale. Today, they live on, not in flesh, but in stone. From the delicate, hollow bones of a small Onurognathus to the colossal wing spars of Quetzalcoatlus, each fossil is a chapter in their epic story. Through the careful work of paleontologists, we can resurrect these ancient rulers, not in body, but in understanding. ensuring that the legacy of the magnificent sky dragons, the first masters of the air, will never be forgotten.